Hello and welcome to Borrow My Belief, a place that's designed to inspire you to live from your heart, where I have guests come on who I believe are living from their heart. And today I have Linnell. I had the pleasure of meeting Linnell in Mexico when I was living in Mexico, running a women's circle. And then I got to know her over the last, I don't know how long it is, Linnell, maybe 2 or 3 years. And I can't wait for her to share her story. And I just know that you're going to be inspired by what she thinks is ordinary, but I know is actually really, really extraordinary. And we were just talking before this podcast how we can't always see ourselves and what we've achieved. And to me, this woman's achieved so much. So that's my introduction to you, Linnell. And I don't know if you want to say something from there before I go on to ask you some questions, introduce yourself and explain maybe how we met and go from there and we'll see what flows.
Thank you, Joanne. So we originally met, I think it would have been about near on 3 years ago now that we actually met. And that was when I had the pleasure of attending one of your women's circles, which was something you had just started up in Playa. And I remember the first thing he said to me was, is that a Scottish accent? Because there's not very many Scottish people here. And so I was like, oh, but then it wasn't until, because I was like, that's not a Scottish accent I'm hearing there. And then you were like, no, but I lived in Scotland for a long time. And I think that gave us an immediate connection, didn't it? It was just,
Yeah.
you told me like your kids were born in Scotland and yeah, and that was it. We were off. Really
We
good
were off.
friends. Yes.
And it's really interesting because I was really nervous before that women's circle. You wouldn't have known that. Was that the one that I did with my daughter as well?
You did.
I
I
did.
knew. Yes.
And here I am 3 years on, that kind of thing I'm not nervous about. And I know you were a little bit nervous today. So hopefully
Yes.
you're gonna relax and get into the flow of this. And what I remember from that day is that we really did connect and we had no idea, although we felt intuitively, we had no idea what was you had no idea what was to come that day. You were, if I remember rightly, you were having problems with your neck and you couldn't play the sport that you love. And
That's right.
I remember we talked about how I'd broken my arm once and I couldn't do my triathlons and how I was able to look back and see what life was trying to show me. But little did we know what you were going to go through from that moment on. That was our original connection. And then I think it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, I was walking along the street and I kind of got this intuitive hit to take a different turn. And I was only just on this journey of listening to my that type of intuition. And so I just followed it. And then I bumped into you, didn't I? On the street, you were cycling by and you'd stopped
That's
and give
right.
directions as I walked past.
That's
And
right.
then we just connected more from there on.
Yeah, I remember you saying when because I was standing out, I was trying to get out the sun, and the next minute I seen you on the other side of the road, and I remember you coming across and saying, because I was really excited to see you, and you said, I was supposed to go a totally different road, but I just got this call, and I think we must have stood there for about an hour chatting
Yeah.
that day. It was so exciting, and that I think that's when we realised that we had even more in common. Just the
Yeah.
way that we thought we would approach life.
Yes, and the total synchronicity. And then we are going to talk about what actually happened in your life from there on and what happened with me. But I remember even further down the road when we found out we'd done the same coaching diploma with the same
Right.
people, and we had that in common as well. So from there on, when we can talk about intuition, because I think that followed a lot in this journey, I was guided back to Scotland, and I remember messaging you and saying I'm back in normal life and I've got a job, and never expecting to hear in a million years that you were gonna be back in Scotland? Because what I'd learned from you was, well, do you want to talk first of all about how you came to, we'll cover why you came away from Mexico, but how you came to be in Mexico? Because to me, your decision to go to Mexico in the first place, and then me meeting you there and seeing how my story is completely different to yours. You were so at home in Mexico, you loved it there, you were living your dream life. So we'll start off by you talk about how that very first section, how you came to be in the place that you loved and called home at that point.
Okay. So I think I was like a lot of people for years and years. I was working in the corporate world. I then, it was in my head, I had this dream. I used to say, oh, I'd love to live abroad one day. But I had this thing I was going to be Madge on a wee scooter in Benidorm. That was my idea of living abroad. And I was like, oh, if I can retire at, 60. And then I used to say, but I don't know, because if I retired young, I think I'd be bored. So that was my initial limiting belief that held me back. So I was always a traveller, though. From 24-year-old, I went to live in Australia for a year, came back there, and I had started backpacking there. And that was the first in me thinking, oh, okay, this isn't too bad, like traveling on your own. So then for years and years, I was blessed to have a job where my boss would let me save up all my holidays for the whole year. And I would generally leave about Christmas Eve and go away for about 5, 6 weeks. And I used to buy just round the world tickets. And I detest the cold. I really, really hate the cold. And I used to say, why was I born in Scotland? So I was always seeking the warmth. And it was always out a backpack. And I used to say to myself, one day I'm going to have a chest of drawers. I'm going to be somewhere where it's warm and I'm going to have a chest of drawers. And I'm going to put all my clothes in it and they're just going to stay there. But again, I just thought it was a dream. And then I went to a vision board workshop once. And naturally, all the stuff that came out in the board was palm trees and big houses and oh, dogs and partners, and there was so much in it. And I used to have it in my bedroom, and it was something that I didn't really look at that much. And then it went away in the cupboard, as you do when you're doing a bit of decorating. And then COVID hit, the joys hit. And I got put on furlough in the March. And I remember the first morning thinking I was going to work, getting the message for the boss saying, don't bother coming in. And my immediate reaction is, what am I going to do in my life? Like my life revolves around well, it was my work, my actual main job, but I also was doing coaching. I was trained, as you mentioned earlier, I was trained with the company to do transformational coaching. And then it's like, now I can't even meet my clients and everything. So I remember the first thing I did that morning was start washing the windows at 6 in the morning because I was just like, what am I going to do in my life? So very quickly, I got myself a bike and started to go out exploring. I used to set myself a little task every day of I had a purpose to cycle. One day I found myself 50 miles away thinking I would get a train back and then didn't realise that COVID had stopped the trains. So yes, then I met a girl and she said that she actually wanted to pack in her job and go away and find somewhere like a desert island to write a book. So I was doing a little bit of brainstorming with her around where she could possibly go. I said, oh, Thailand's wonderful. I said, but I remember being in Mexico once and meeting this woman by chance on a beach and found out that she was actually what they called an expat. So I was like, what's an expat? And she said to me, come and meet all these people that live in my little community. So I spent 5 nights with this woman and meeting all these people. And I thought, this is just a bit like you know, the sitcom Friends, where everybody's like lives in a building and gets to know each other. And I thought, what a wonderful life. That's absolutely amazing. So I was telling my friend about this, and that was originally in 2012 that episode happened when I met that woman. So the more I was talking to my friend about it, I started to think, oh my God, like imagine if that could do that. But I was like, oh, I've got my job. Obviously can't do that. Really enjoyed my job, but just hated the cold and the misery of the winter that Scotland brings. So I don't know what it was. One day I think maybe talking to her, I woke up. I remember it was a Wednesday morning, and I just said to myself, "Do you know what? I'm going to resign from my job." And I've never resigned from a job in my life. And I was like, I'm going to resign from my job. I'm going to pack everything up, and I'm just going to see what happens. I knew that Mexico was open per se, because Kenya was supposed to be closed, but it was open. And things were heating up in Scotland as well, where they were starting to shut down people flying and everything. So it was a bit of a process of I decided to rent out my home, which I'd lived in for 31 years and absolutely adored, and then thought it's really going to pain me letting other people live in my house. However, and that's the only way I'm going to be able to do it. So it's a 6-month visa that you initially come on to Mexico. And that was in the June. I remember it was in the June, and I had a lot of things to do to the house to get it to a state where you comply with all the regulations in order to, put tenants in. And then I was supposed to come in November, and then it started to be that they were shutting down. You know, it was longer. So I phoned up the travel agent. I was like, get me on the first flight. I'm getting out of here. And that's literally what I did. And I came across thinking I knew one person, but she was already hooked up. She already had a Mexican boyfriend. And I was just like, you can do this, girl. You can do this. And I arrived on the Saturday, and on the Monday, we had a hurricane. So it was my first experience of everything shutting down and knowing that I was going to be living with candles for a few days and buckets of water for my toilet. And I was like, okay, so this is life in Mexico. And I thought, I'm just going to see what happens, see what unfolds. I've got 6 months to decide what I want to do. And I just said to myself, you can always go back. That's it. You can always go back. And after about 2 weeks of being here, I was like, I need to speak to an immigration lawyer. I was just like, this is paradise. This is absolute paradise. And
I know,
that's yeah.
I know that when I met you, you absolutely loved living in there. That was your home. You decided it was your home, and I was just thinking that you took that leap and you made that decision, and I was thinking how much the tenacity that you have served you with what you did there, and also you might have people that are listening to this. I mean, wait till they hear the rest of your story, right? Because this is only the beginning, but you'll have people that are listening to this because it's kind of designed. I put it out on a Sunday evening, and it's designed for the person that is dreading work the next day. And I just want to show that there are possibilities. Even it doesn't have to be. I just want to say it doesn't have to be giving up your job and doing what you're doing. It can be somebody who's dreaming of running and they want to do a 5K and they never thought a 5K was possible. But with your story, people might say, oh, well, that's all right for you. You had resources. But what I've noticed is in my own journey, it wasn't until I educated myself and I listened to advice from people who had already done what I wanted to do and had a mindset shift that I understood that I had resources that I didn't even know were there. That to open to anybody who thinks or just straight shuts down, well, I've got a dream and I can't do it because of XYZ, open up to possibilities because every client that I coach, and I'm sure you've had the same, when I meet people in different countries and spiritual communities particularly, we often can't see what's right in front of our nose. So I've got a client that I started with last year, and they already had everything they were looking for, and they couldn't see it. And that was what came to mind. You had the resource in that flat, but you could have gone, well, I can't go there because I don't have the money. I can't give up my job because I don't have the money. When in actual fact, you were sitting on the resource to make it possible for you. Yeah.
That's exactly it. Yeah, I never really thought about that because I had a strong attachment to my home. It had been my home for 31 years, and I didn't the thought of somebody else being in there, but I knew that that was really going to be the only way that I was going to be able to manage it. And I also had accepted, because I had a 2-bedroom apartment, I accepted that I was going to be living in one room. And that was a massive turnaround because it actually totally transformed my, belief that I needed all this stuff. I needed all this stuff in order to survive every day. And funnily enough, the apartment that I did move into didn't even have a chest of drawers to start with. It only had like two sort of little cupboards at the side of my bed, but I did get a chest of drawers. So my dream did come true
so so
eventually.
so it's really interesting you said that, because along my journey as well, I discovered I didn't need all the things. It was the fulfillment inside as well, that I'd been educated to think I needed more and more and more. So when I met you, and you were really happy in player, and it was so obvious you were, it was, like I said, it was different to my journey. And I went back to Scotland, and I messaged you and said, I'm back in Scotland, because I knew you were from Edinburgh and I was back in Glasgow. And then I was really surprised to hear that you were coming back to Scotland. And we did get to spend some time together once you did. And that was a really, really, really tough part of your journey. And I can ask you questions along the way, but I think probably the best thing to do, I know there's one viewer who will really, really relate to this story actually. The best thing to do is you tell your story, and we'll see what questions arise and where it goes from there. Because what a story. You loved living in Mexico. People can see that you're in Mexico now, but you went through something where, certainly last time I saw you in the physical, it was starting to look like you couldn't live in Mexico. And
Didn't know
you've
if I was going to
overcome
live.
that. You have overcome that. So I
Yeah.
don't know where you want to start.
Start. Okay. Well, I'll kind of start with just sort of keeping it in Mexico initially. So I used to go regularly to the beach with a friend, and I would sit there and quite honestly pinch myself. I was like, how could I make this happen? I had so much gratitude, happiness. I was just beyond happy, living my dream life. And I had decided that after a year and a half of being away, that I hadn't seen my parents, and my dad's birthday was coming up. So I decided to go home to surprise him. So this was in June 2022, and jumped on a plane, went home, had a wonderful time catching up with my family and friends. And while I was there, I went for a routine mammogram. It was the 3-year cycle, and I had a mammogram due. So I went along for the mammogram, and everything was fine. And when I came back, because it takes about 6 weeks to get the results, I was told, and I never ever got the results. So I called the clinic, and the clinic said, I'm sorry, like we sent it out. And I said, look, I never got the results. They said, well, data protection, we can't really tell you over the phone. I said, yeah, I understand that. I says, but I'm away at the moment. And they said, okay, just go away, enjoy your life, and we'll see you in 3 years' time. So that was what I was told. And so that's exactly what I did do. So I was here back home, I call this home. I was here for like, I don't know, it was maybe another month and a half, 2 months or something. And I was lying watching a video one night and I just suddenly, I think I scratched myself and I was like, oh, what's that? I was like, that feels weird. And I was like this and I was like that. And I was like, oh, that feels weird. But I was like, it feels like a bit of a lump, but it can't be because I've just had a mammogram. So everything has to be fine. Can't be. So I just ignored it. And then this friend that I used to sit on the beach with, she actually had breast cancer at one point. So I sort of said to her, I've got this lump, what do you think? And this is to take note actually, because she started like pushing away at it and it was moving. And she goes, no, it's moving. So I think it's attached to your body, so it's fine. And I've already given her the status of doctor by then and said, yeah, okay, that's fine, just ignore it. But anyway, another month went by and I started to get pain and a real itch. And I remember thinking, I don't want to Google this. I just don't want to Google it. I went into total denial, thinking, oh no, I'm sure I was told that breast cancer can't be painful. So it can't be that. So another couple of weeks went by, and then I was in a swimming pool with a really, really close friend here, and I said to her, "Can you have a feel at that?" And she just her face, and she just said, "Oh, I think you need to go to a doctor." She says, she's seen the panic that she had kind of caused in me. She was like, please just go and see a doctor tomorrow. I'm sure it's just fatty tissue or whatever, but please go to the doctor. So anyway, I went to the doctor. The doctor couldn't speak English, so I have my Google Translate, and all I said was, I have a lump. I can't speak English. Can you help me? And she felt the lump, and I immediately just seen the look on her face. And she just wrote something and said, you need to go for a mammogram. So I went along. It was immediate panic, not speaking the language, thinking I'm not going to be able to get an appointment because I can't. They said you need to phone the clinic. So I'm going about crazy. I need to find this clinic. I need to get there. So I get there and they could speak English. It was fine. She said, oh, come in tomorrow and we'll do an ultrasound on you. I said, how long will it take? 20 minutes. When will we get the results? We'll send the results to you in the afternoon. So I was like, that's fine. 11 o'clock. I've got this on. As you pointed out, I had a problem with my neck. So I was seeing a physiotherapist. I was blocking all this stuff in. It was all. So I'm in there. Why are you here? Oh, I have a lump. Lie down. 2 minutes later, is there breast cancer in the family? I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Whoa, breast cancer? What do you mean? She says, oh, is there breast cancer in the family? I says, well, there is, but it's my dad's brother's daughter. Oh, okay. So she keeps going and going and going. And I'm like, they said this was only going to take 20 minutes. And she's not stopping. Eventually, I'm like, I'm not going to make this physiotherapy appointment. I'm like, is everything okay? And she just turns off the machine. And she said, so you have 3 lumps in your right breast, and there's a blood supply going in there. So, and I said, what does that mean? What does that mean? She goes, well, to be honest, you need to have biopsies done. And I could sort of, by the look on her face, it was just like, this is not right. She goes, and so I asked how much it was going to be for biopsies, and she was like, you need to go to Cancun, and you've got 3 lumps, and blah blah blah. And then I sort of said, what do you think? And she says, I think you need to be with family and friends. And she said, because it's going to have to be totally investigated. And I was like, I thought, is this real? This could really be. Because at that point, I had been told that I wasn't going to actually find out till the afternoon. So I didn't even take a friend with me. I had a friend on standby to be with me when I was sent the results, but I didn't take a friend. So note to self. So I came out and it was a busy, busy main road. And I just stood frozen and cried and cried and cried. And what she had said to me in true Mexican style is, well, best case scenario, you'll lose your breast. Worst case, it's spread and you'll die. And I was like, has she seriously just said that? Yeah, that was her words, just subtle as a brick. So I came out, cried and cried and cried and cried more, and came home. And that was when the whole thing started to unfold. I contacted my doctor back home. They made an emergency appointment. And the sad thing is, I had just actually moved into a new apartment and I'd only been here about a week. And I just absolutely loved this new apartment. And then I was told that I had an appointment in 2 weeks' time to come in and see the consultant. And so I basically got a flight booked and I arrived on the 22nd of November and my appointment was on the 23rd. So do you want me to go in and tell you what happened?
Well, yeah. Listening to you there as well, you did that all alone, and you did say note to self quite a lot there. So I remember we're both in our 50s, right? And I remember when I learned about breast cancer, I was told that it wouldn't move and I was told that it wouldn't be painful as well. So that's really good
Interesting,
to
yeah.
hear,
Mhm.
just so that
And
they,
an itch. The breast is itchy.
yeah, yeah. And gosh, that wasn't easy to go through. I can't, being alone through that experience, and then all your dreams are kind of shattered, aren't you? And then you're on autopilot getting to the UK. And also, because I know you, I know you couldn't even go back to the flat that you'd had for those 30 odd years. And I actually wrote a note about this because we've had conversations around what I'm about to say, that you're looking for the meaning in what was happening. And so what does this mean? Is this going to bring you are such a person that looks for the positives in everything, and you were looking for the meaning in it, and what's this bringing me? But I also remember there was also this, but this is really hard as well, and I could see you, we will go into a bit more depth, but I could see you balancing, well, what's this bringing me and what can I be positive about, with the, oh my god, this is awful and I'm going through hell. You were balancing the two, and I remember being really inspired by you. And I remember having that original call because you were having the original time we connected when you got back to the UK was when you were living at a friend's and you were sleeping in the same bed and you couldn't go back to your flat. And I know you ultimately you went and ended up living with your mum and dad, and we can talk about that as well. But I remember when we had that original call and how inspiring you were. And I remember thinking, this woman, you were so good at friendship. And throughout that whole time that we haven't connected in a while now, but throughout all that time that we did, what I noticed about you was you'd built yourself the most incredible network of friends, and you really do value friends. And because of that, your friends were there, and you were able, I know at one time your mum got a bit frustrated with you because you were able to connect with your friends, and that's where the journey started, didn't it? You went and stayed with a friend.
Yes, so I have a friend who I always say that in any disaster, I want her in my life because she's just one of these people that's like, right, that's fine. So we've got your flight booked. I'll be picking you up from the airport and you can come and stay with me, blah, 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 blah. And it was just this immense, I felt like I just sort of sat there and said, tell me what to do because I didn't know. I had just lost total control in my life. And what I would, the main emotion, funnily enough, that was coming through was incredible anger. I had such an anger within me. One, I was coming back to the UK and it was freezing cold and it was lovely and warm here. I did not want to be back home. I had just moved into my dream apartment. It was just, I just, I was so angry, so angry. That's what, and I just kept saying, but why? But why? why would this happen to me? You know, why would everything be perfect in my life? Like I was so grateful for everything, and why would it all just be the rug be pulled away from me so quickly? But that friend was the friend that came to the hospital with me the next again day. And I sat in front of the consultant and he said, okay, let's have a feel. So I felt it, he felt it. And the first thing he said is, oh, it's just a cyst. And I said, oh, oh, thank God. I didn't care about the £1,000 I just spent to get home. I was just like, that's all I want you to hear. You know, it's just a cyst. So he then says to the student that's in the room, come and feel this, it's just a cyst. So he said, so, but we're going to send you down the stairs for an ultrasound. It won't be a mammogram because you only had a mammogram in June, and that's too much radiation in your body. So, but we'll send you down. And I says, but look at the size of this thing. I said, what will happen? He says, well, sometimes we drain them and sometimes we don't. So I'm sitting in the waiting room with my friend, and she's like, oh my God. And I'm like, I know, I'm so excited. So she says, how long do you think you'll stay? I says, maybe about a week. When we get home tonight, I'm going to book my flight back. And I was just so excited. 10 minutes later, that my world was kind of turned upside down because I went in to get my ultrasound. I'm all undressed, and then I said to the nurse, "Oh, by the way, I've already had an ultrasound, and this is the results. I've translated it from the Spanish for you." So she reads it, and I said, "And I had a mammogram in June," and she's like, "Oh, a mammogram in June? Oh, let me look into this." So she come back into the room and she didn't even need to say anything. I could see her whole demeanor had changed. I'm highly sensitive to energy. I pick up so quickly, something's not right here. So she does the, oh no, sorry, first of all, she says to me, I'm really sorry, but can you please get dressed again? You're going for mammograms. And I'm busy arguing with her and saying, no, 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 the consultant says I'm not to get any more. It's too much radiation in my body. And she's like, you have to go. So of course, because I was in so much pain, I was actually crying, and like, because for the breast just to even be touched, it was so painful. Anyway, they then took me back in and they did the ultrasound, and that's when she said, "Yeah, there's debt, but I don't think it's three lumps. I think it's one big lump. It's the shape that makes it look like it's three lumps. Um, and so, can we do a biopsy? And you'll come back in a week for the results." So we did this, and then I had to go back up and see the consultant, and he has my June mammogram and my November mammogram in front of him, and you can clearly see the tumour in June that was there in November, and so it was missed. And so, just as an aside, that's what I always say to all my friends now: please don't just believe because you've had a mammogram that everything is fine. You should always continue to actually do the self-examination. So I said to him, how is this even possible? And that you can see it. And he explained about fatty tissue and dense tissue, and how dense tissue is more white and the tumour is white, and so it can kind of get lost in there. To me, it was clear as day. I could see the two of them then. And it just makes me wonder what my journey would have been like had it then happened when I was in June. But it was what it was. And I was just about to leave. He says, you'll be coming back next week. And I just turned to him and I said, what's the chances of this not being breast cancer? And he said, very small. So that day I left, still in a pure state of disbelief. But all I wanted to know was how quickly can I get back to Playa? And I know it sounds crazy at the time, but it was just like, no, no, I don't want this. It's a slight inconvenience. Everything's going to be fine. How quick can I get back? So then they very quickly, a week later, I went back and they gave me the results, but they told me I was waiting on one result, which would determine exactly what the treatment looked like. So the treatment was to be initially 4.5 months of chemotherapy, then have my first operation, then have all going well from that, then have radiotherapy. And at the same time as my chemotherapy, I would also, I may also have to go on to another drug, which is called Herceptin. So I am still, the second appointment, I take my parents with me and they tell me, yes, definitely you have breast cancer. The one result that we're waiting on will determine, and it's called HER2, and what your full treatment plan looks like. And I said to her, what if it's the chances of me having HER2? And she said, it's very uncommon. Only about 20% of women actually have this. So I leave that day thinking my mum and dad, they were with me, were saying that's really good odds, 80% no. And the next second day, I met with a cancer nurse, and this was all in the November. And I remember me saying, "So, how quickly are you going to get back?" And she said, "Let's work all this out, Linnell." And she says, "Maybe by February." And I'm like, "Right, February, that's it. Eye on the prize." She says, "But I will phone you on Monday with your final result. And that will then determine what your full journey." Monday comes, and the first thing she says to me, "Are you sitting down?" And so I knew what she was going to say. And she says, "I'm so sorry, Linnell, but you have HER2. So you have what's called triple positive breast cancer. We need to start you on chemo next week, but you're coming to see the oncologist." And I don't know if you want me to talk about what I initially did.
Well,
Yes.
I'm just wanting to know, and I remember the conversations that I had with you initially. You wanted to investigate going down a holistic route, and you were very torn between the conventional medical and the holistic route. And also, yeah, you were really torn. And what was very much an undercurrent of that as well was getting back to Mexico. You wanted to get back to Mexico, but let everybody know what you decided to do in the end. Because I know it was a lot of soul searching.
There was a lot of soul searching, and I had done research on the side effects of chemo. And it's not just the side effects as you're actually going through it, it's the long-term side effects. And so, admittedly, I was very anti-chemo. So when went to meet with the oncologist, this was the part that really shocked me. So what they do from your pathology report is they put it all into this, it's on the computer, I can't remember this site on the computer or whatever, and it kind of churns out what your benefits are from chemo, radiotherapy, and also Herceptin. And so I remember her saying to me, this is based, I think, on life expectancy, 10,000 women, the increase in your life expectancy over 10 years if you had used these interventions as such. So for an operation, it was something like 76% to actually remove it. But she's then said to me, and for chemo, it's 5%, and for Herceptin, and I'm like, excuse me, stop, sorry. Did you say 5 or 50? And I had my friend with, and she said 5%. And I'm looking at my friends going, so you're telling me that chemo only gives you an additional 5%? And she says, yes, and Herceptin 3%. So that's a drug that you have an injection every 3 weeks for a year. And I was like, whoa, 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 no, there's no way. So we go through all of this, all of the chemo, all the side effects of that, the potential long-term side effects of that for 5%. And she said, well, it's 8% with your Herceptin. And I said, that's not a lot, is it? And I remember her saying to me, well, actually, it is. I perceive it quite a lot. She says, I have a child and I would be throwing everything at it in order to, try and win the battle with this disease. And I just thought, nah, nah.
And
And she,
also there was
sorry.
the drug. Was there some side effect that you couldn't go in the sun if you'd had?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. Well remembered. So it was side effects of that, yeah, long-term side effects of that. And um, you so many different side effects from like chemo. But yeah, but when I was sitting there, she was looking at me and she said to me, "You've already made up your mind, haven't you?" And she goes, "Look, we will support whatever journey you choose, but I can tell by your face." And so she then said to me, I said, "How long?" So she says, "Okay, so if that's your decision, you'll go straight to operation." And I said, "How long before my operation?" She said, "About 6 to 8 weeks." I said, "Right, I'm going back to Playa and I'll come back in 6 or 8 weeks then." And she says, "I'll phone you on Monday and get your final decision." And she actually never got to that stage because the next again day I got a call from the consultant's assistant to say I had an appointment the next again Tuesday to go in and speak to him. So I went in to speak to him and he said, "Okay, you will be getting a lumpectomy," which I was ecstatic about. So for those that don't know what a lumpectomy is, instead of the removal of the full breast, because of the positioning of where my tumour was at the top of the breast, they try to always preserve as much healthy tissue as possible. So they were actually going to be able to just go in through the nipple and make the incision and get up and do the tumour, take the tumour out. But also what was going to be required was, because I'm quite slim and the tumour was the size of a golf ball, they were taking liposuction. So they were going to remove the fat from my legs to do the reconstruction. And they were also going to do remove lymph nodes. So that
That's
was
probably great. Liposuction, great. But I also remember the journey you went on that and the whole body image and how, I mean, gosh, you've been through so much, how the journey you went through of your body image changing and everything.
well, I had lost an excess. Like what I decided to do was go on a plant-based diet because all the research and everything that I was doing, if I was going to take the holistic route, plant-based was what they spoke about. And I actually spoke to a nutrition in Mexico. And when she came up with what the diet was, I remember just crying and crying and crying because I won't go into that, but it was just, to me, it was impossible.
Yeah.
But I think what the main thing was as well is that when I went online and tried to find anybody that had done the holistic route and not taken the chemotherapy, it was a lonely, lonely
Yeah.
route.
And
Though
also,
I could not find anyone.
yeah, and also you researched whether you could get the drug in Mexico as well, didn't you? And it was hard to
That
get hold of and expensive.
Well, no, that was slightly different. Like that was kind of like slightly different because this was, at that point, I had refused chemo, was going down the line of agreeing to have the operation, and was told I would have the operation the following week, which was the 21st of December. And so I was all then I went for an MRI just before the operation and they discovered something else in the breast. So they had to get me in really early that morning to go in, and there's what's called a little scabby scout. It gets put in where the tumour is, and I also had another area, and they wanted to put these two. It's so that it shows them where removal has been done, where they talk about in future. I'm just like, there is no future. I've done my piece, But at that point, so yes. So I'm already, my operation's supposed to be at 3 o'clock. I've been in hospital since 7 in the morning. All I could think about is food and True Linnell style. But I did lose almost a stone in weight, and I was not a heavy person. Going on the plant-based diet, it didn't agree with me. And I rapidly lost weight and muscle very, very quickly. So I see the surgeon coming to me just before the operation and to deliver the news that it's not going to happen because there's not enough theatre time that day. So that was my first um, drama start of the whole journey. So I'll just sort of quickly then cover what did happen. 3 weeks later, I did have the operation, and I then I had previously been told it hadn't spread to my lymph nodes. But when they went in and removed some of the lymph nodes, there was cancer found in there as well. And they also told me initially, and the surgeon said to me, but good news, we got clear margins. So when they removed the lump, and then he starts to read again, and he went, oh no, I'm sorry. So I'm then celebrating in his office, oh, we got clear margins, that's great, it's fantastic. I'll be back in Playa in a few weeks' time or whatever. And then he went, literally 30 seconds later, no, I'm sorry, we didn't. And that was when my world was turned upside down, because he then said, we didn't get clear margins, so you will now require another operation, and it spread to your lymph nodes. And that was then when I then had done a lot more research on the type of cancer I did have, and found out that it was actually a very aggressive cancer, which I didn't really know. And I think I made that decision not fully informed. I'm not blaming my oncologist, but I honestly did not realise how aggressive that type triple positive had been. And so I immediately, when he told me that, I just said, I have to go ahead with chemotherapy because I have to throw absolutely everything at it.
So you did. You went on that journey, and what a journey you went on. And gosh, you did. I remember you going shopping for wigs and all sorts, and the body image and what you went through. And also on top of that, you went and lived with your mum and dad, and that was quite a thing in itself, wasn't it? And I don't know if you want to touch on this. You actually reconnected, didn't you, with your mum particularly? And I don't know if you want to touch on that and what
Not so much.
journey gave you.
We won't really go into that
Yeah.
a lot. Yeah, yeah.
So I remember you finding the positives in that stretch, and
Well, immediately when I started, yeah, like I was kind of like, okay, so what have I got in control here? And it was like, let's go and try on some wigs, try to make a little bit sort of fun of it. Because nothing can really prepare you, because for those that already know me, know I'm a very girly girl, very, very girly girl. And your hair plays a big, big part in that. I don't think anything can prepare you for that. But when um, immediately the day after I had my first chemo, I it, it was almost like I felt I was being punished for taking the chemo. It was a really stupid mindset, but let's just say my journey of chemo was absolutely horrendous, and they really couldn't keep me out of the hospital. Every time I would get chemo, I would become seriously ill and be whisked back in again. And I just went through so many things going wrong. They reduced the dosage to the stage where my oncologist said, I think we need to sort of skip it. Like we need, and I was like, you're kidding me. Like all my hair's falling out. Um, the whole journey of chemo, and I pray to God that, you know, none of my friends or anybody has to go through this, but there is so many things that you don't know about chemo. Like I got a blood clot in my arm. and you lose all the hair all over your body. So my nose used to just stream of blood constantly. Stupid things that you don't think about. That I got immense itch, severe problems with my eyes, um, pancreatic problems. It was just one thing after another after another. And my oncologist, I think she was just sick of coming to see me in the ward. And she was like, I'm so sorry, Linnell. She says to me, I've honestly never had another patient that's had such a bad reaction. So I think, it's not like that. I know it's not like that for everybody. And I couldn't understand it. But one thing that always stuck with me about my chemo was the very first day I walked into the chemo ward and just seeing all these people sitting. It's not a nice sight at all. And I had a bit of a meltdown, and I ran away to the toilet. And when I came back, my friend was allowed to be there for the first 10 minutes of your first appointments. Oh, you can take people now. And I remember the nurse saying to me, because I was fit, I was the fittest I've ever been in my life because of my lifestyle in Mexico. And I remember the nurse saying to me, oh, you're in really good shape, you're really fit. And I said, well, clearly not that fit because this has happened. And she said to me, but I'll tell you what, she goes, it's not your body that will get you through this. She goes, it's this. And my friend turned to her and she says, well, she's one of the most positive people I've ever met in my life. She said, so she'll get through it. And it always stuck with me when there was days where, and I actually used to think that I would never share this because I was embarrassed. I remember lying in the hospital and I thought, I can't ever tell anybody I thought this because I was embarrassed. But there was days where I was in so much pain, and could not, nothing they could do for me in hospital could help with the pain. And I remember just coming to peace with dying. I became so comfortable because I started to really reflect on what my life had been like and how I'd had such a wonderful life and I'd traveled the world and I had all these incredible friends who I will say created a bed of cotton wool for me. They just basically never could I ever have enough gratitude for what they did. They basically formed this bally cotton wool, and for me, I was fighting for them as well. I just didn't. I just still wanted these people in my life, but I knew for me the pain was so severe that I just lay there and I thought, okay, I'm happy and I'm content. And so if I don't make it till tomorrow, I'm okay with that. And then the next again day, I woke up and I felt better. And I remember the oncologist coming to see me and saying, how are you feeling, Linnell? And I said, oh, I feel a wee bit better. I says, yesterday I wanted to die. I says, I seriously wanted to die. And I was happy with dying because it would stop the pain. And that's all I wanted. And I says, but you know what? Like, what a difference a day makes. Just don't give up. Just do not give up. And I had a couple of episodes of that. Um, but it was just it's actually been something that now I really hold close to my heart when I actually, because there's still always every day things come up in your life that you think, oh, I can't cope with that, or it brings on anxiety or whatever. But that was a real strong lesson for me. And yes, I was fortunate, touching on what you said, I was fortunate. Initially, I stayed with a friend for a month, and God bless her, she had a wee double bed, and she shared that with me for a month. And that's when we did our first call of you finding out about it. Yeah, and I actually came, you went away, didn't you, in between Christmas and New Year, and you kindly invited me down for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you were thanking me for that, and I was going through a really completely different time in my life, and I was really lonely, and I'd just had Christmas alone, away from any of my family, and it was one of the toughest Christmases I've ever had. And you kept thanking me, and I was thinking, well, do you know what? This friend is here with me, and your mindset and the way you bring your energy. There's no wonder you have such incredible friends. You created, when you just said they created calm
Well,
all around you, it's obvious that that would happen type because of the type of person that you are. And I don't know in the end how long that journey lasted, Linnell. I remember then for some reason, we didn't speak or
connect, yeah.
and then I messaged you to tell you how you going on, and I got this picture of Mexico, and I'm thinking, oh my God, she's in Mexico.
Mexico.
No, I don't
It
know how
was
long it was.
18 months.
Yeah.
The journey went on for 18 months. And, but I remember when I first left Mexico that day, I went down to the beach and I brought a little jar of the ocean and a little jar of sand. And I had it on my dressing table in my parents'. And I remember looking at it all the time saying, I'll be back, honey, I'll be back. And I never ever and people would say to me, do you think you're doing the right thing? Do you think that and I said, but you can't just put your life on hold to see, is cancer going to come back? I said, what's going to unfold is going to unfold, but I will
That is
not pull my
different.
life. Yeah.
That's something different about you that I'm noticing right now. You would not have used those words before. So I think what you've just described around when you went through and you make peace with dying, what I've just heard there is you're now living in the moment. And
Yes.
that
Yes.
wasn't what you were doing before. I remember that very first time at the Women's Circle. I was going to ask you actually. Well, first of all, I will ask you a few questions in a minute. I normally ask two questions at the end of a podcast. I've got three for you. But first of all, just want to, well, there's a couple of things I want to say before these questions. Some people who really like the holistic route might feel some shame in, well, I'm going to actually go down the medical route. What would you say to those people?
There absolutely no shame whatsoever. And I will say that the medical profession were incredibly supportive of whatever route I chose. Um, from the research that I did, and the one thing I would say, a big lesson I took from it was do not join Facebook groups that are all about cancer, because they gave me a lot of dark night of the soul. Because
Yeah.
when you're going through treatment, you can't sleep as well. That's one thing. It's very, very hard or you sleep at silly times and you have such broken sleep. So my sleep would be filled with researching and going onto all these Facebook groups. And I was posting in the Facebook groups, has anybody gone the holistic route? And I was getting radio silence, and the only stuff I was getting was saying, are you absolutely crazy? Do you know what this cancer is like? And I was just like, it just tore me up. And I honestly just feel I didn't then have the strength to do it on my own. Not only was I just like weak with everything that was going on with me because I'd lost all this weight as well. My mindset was I felt like if almost I just had one buddy, to go through it with me. But I remember feeling incredibly lonely, and I remember like lying in my bed one day, breaking my heart, and I couldn't stop crying. And my mum thought, she's not even been up for the toilet, what's going on? And she came into the room and she immediately thought, oh my God, she's had such bad news or something. And I just could not stop crying. I was like I'm just so lonely. Like I can't do this on my own. I need somebody, And I was like reading books. Chris Wark is a guy that actually wrote his cancer journey and how he did not go down the conventional route. But now, in hindsight, I want to now be able to say to myself, God willing, it will never return. But if anything ever happens to me, I want to be able to say that I threw everything at it. And I have no regrets now for actually doing that. I don't want to ever think if only I had done X, Y, and Z, it might have been different. Because I did all the treatment I was told that I needed to do.
And I'm looking at you now, and I've not seen you, right? And you, as soon as we came on the video, you complimented me on my hair. But the first thing I noticed about you was how wonderful you're looking and the tan. Because I remember
Oh,
having that conversation where you didn't think that you were going to be able to go in the sun, and you clearly are. And I know
yes,
you've been and played your sport this morning. It's pickleball, isn't it?
pickleball I'm addicted
So
to,
I
yeah.
know you're living that life now, and I've heard you say, I have actually heard you say that it's not all roses and there's things come up, but you're clearly living that life and you're back in the place that you love, which you never thought was possible.
No. And you can, um, you know, I was told you have to have like factor 50 on. That's the way. And I used to think, oh my God, I'm Casper the Ghost. I'm never going to be able to get a colour with factor 50. But actually, I did, and I have. And I actually don't really go to the beach that much, to be honest, now, because my addiction with pickleball uses up most of my days. So I play that 6 mornings, and I think just actually being out in the sunshine does that. But it's a big factor for my mental health, pickleball, because there's such a strong community that I have built up through there, and have a lot of really, really close friends from that. And so playa it is just one incredible, incredible place. They say that you either love it or you hate it. And
I don't think I fall in any of them. I'm gonna say that I'm different because I came for 6 months. It was the perfect 6 months. I don't have I don't feel like a full like I need to be back there, but I would come back and visit. So I probably do love it. You're probably right, but I don't want to live there. I don't hate it at all. It was a great place for 6 months. So I have these three questions for you.
mm,
So first one is, what do you think? And it might not even be your journey with cancer. It could be out with that. What do you think the main lessons been for you, Linnell?
well, I think you touched on it earlier on living in the moment.
Mm,
Very, very much living in the moment. Having having gone through living your dream, faced with adversity, to back to living your dream. I think it's always the belief that if you want something enough, you can make it happen.
yeah.
It doesn't, there will definitely be obstacles that will come up, but if it's staying true to yourself, and a lot of people used to say to me, I could never do what you've done. And I used to say, no, you actually could, but you're choosing not to. And that's okay. Yeah. That's okay as well. Don't feel you're any less because it's just not your journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've lived life even before that, all your traveling and everything. And I remember you saying that your boss used to say to you, why haven't you got more confidence than you've got? Because you really have lived life to the full. Uh,
Yes.
so my next question, these next two questions I do ask every guest. If you could go back to any point in your life, any point whatsoever, and you could speak to a version of you, I know you've done this type of thing before, what message would you give to yourself? That's something that they needed to hear.
I'd um, probably go back my mid-20s, actually, I think. That would be a time in life I'd want to go back. And it would definitely be, for God's sake, girl, do not sweat the small stuff.
Mm,
Because I feel I spent so many years, like years and years of sweating the small stuff. And I suffered immensely from imposter syndrome, immensely. and never felt that I was worthy of these things and that my capability was, I needed to hide and I was going to get discovered. And now it just seems it was just a waste of energy and brain consumption. You know, the sleepless nights I had over that. And now, when things do come up for me now, I truly do. Don't get me wrong, I still get that oh in the stomach when something, when anxiety hits, because it'll never go. It'll never go. But it's having a better understanding of why I feel the way I do is my self-soothing. And so I can take myself to that place. And I always say, is this going to be such a big deal in a week's time, Linnell?
Great, great.
Yeah.
And the last question I ask, and it might be something completely different or similar, if you could pay forward anything from your own journey and you could speak to the viewers out there and say, give them some words of wisdom, what would it be?
Well, I think the words of wisdom was, I already spoke about that slightly earlier, about focusing on the men and women, actually, not just women, and that listen to your, when you know something is wrong with your own body, you know, do not choose to ignore it, because we can go into denial. And I don't know if it would have changed my journey, you know, would it have changed my journey? I absolutely don't know, and I don't need to know. But listen to your own body and don't just take the word of the first medical professional that you come across. Something doesn't, because full transparency, I changed surgeon as well, because there's some things that I wasn't happy with. So I have got that little devil inside me, you know, that sometimes like, no, this is not resonating with me. So I think it's just trust the inner voice, and don't always try and dampen it. Maybe it's got a lot of valuable wisdom in it.
Brilliant. And that goes for every area. That's one of the reasons I've got this podcast. So to show people to listen to that inner voice. And that comes up a lot in the discussions that I have. Thank you, Linnell. It's been a pleasure having you on this podcast.
Pleasure is mine.
And you know, for all your worrying, this is the longest one I've ever recorded. There was so much gold in there, and I could keep going for ages, and it's been a real pleasure.
And I was so nervous about it, and you've been incredible, Joanne. Thank you so much for making me feel so relaxed. I was so nervous about this, wasn't I? I was like, I don't know what I want to do, Joe.
I'm going to leave this bit in so that people can hear it, so they can see ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Thanks, Linnell.
Thank you.